Okay, hi, welcome back to Spirit Lounge. I hope you guys are doing really well as normal. And welcome to the next chapter of the Upanisads. So today we're going to be covering off the Brhad-Aranyaka Upanisad chapter 3. I'll bring it up onto the screen now so you guys can see that. Okay. So this is a quite lengthy chapter, so it's going to take over an hour. So remember, if it's too lengthy, the video, just watch it in two parts. And again, there's a lot of metaphors as we are finding in the Upanisads at the moment, which appeal to some and don't appeal to others. So we'll see how this goes. Let me just realign this screen a little bit because it's not so good. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so as we know, the Upanisads were written 700 to 400 BC, and they're the fifth of four main Vedas, which were the Rig, Sama, Yaya, and Atharva Vedas. And you can read up into those, and this is the book which we're using, which I'm going through, that describe the Upanisads, which are more of an esoteric spiritual text, whereas the others are not so much. But although the Upanishad does take extracts from these other four Vedas in its content. Okay, and the Brhad-Aranyaka Upanishad is one of the is regarded as one of the most important. It's got three sections which are called Kandas, and it's talking about the teaching of the basic identity, and it's called the philosophical teaching. The three stages are the hearing, which is a sravana, manana, which is logical reflection. So hearing is the first receipt of something, is when you embark upon the journey. And then the manana is the logical reflection where you contemplate on what is heard. And the upapatti is reflecting mind, and upapatti is actually the real transcendental passage of more advanced or what you call integrated contemplative meditation upon on your spiritual practice. So there's various stages, but these are all really all at the same time in reality. Okay, so we're going to go through this, and the first Brahmana, this is called sacrificial worship and its rewards, and it does talk about the sacrificial horse again. So I've taken out the parts which I think make sense, and we'll discuss these and make sense of them as we walk through. So Yanaka, who's a king of Videha, performed a sacrifice at which many presents offered to the priests. The Brahmanas, which is Vedic knowledge, remember, and also the Brahmanas, Vedic knowledge of the Kurus and the Pankalas were gathered. So those who studied Vedic knowledge were called Brahmanas as well, and the Vedic Brahmanas also means knowledge, Vedic knowledge, esoteric knowledge. He enclosed 1,000 cows he enclosed 1,000 cows in a pen, and to the horns were fastened 10 coins of gold. So this was a present to these priests that he was offering, and he's offering it for knowledge, for enlightenment. He said to them, "Venerable Brahmanas, let him of you who is the wisest Brahmana among you take away these cows." So he's offering this as a gift for them imparting knowledge unto him. Yajnavalkya, who is the main one who steps forward, said to his pupil, who's the Brahmana, the main Brahmana here, said to his pupil, "Drive them away." The Brahmanas were enraged. How can he declare himself to be the wisest Brahmana? So they're not happy that Yajnavalkya stepped forward there. Asvala, the Hotter chief, which is the chief priest of the Yanaka, asked Yajnavalkya, "Are you indeed a Brahmana among us?" "We bow, but we just wish to have these cows." The Hotter chief, which is again the chief priest, decided to question him. So they wanted to take the gifts anyway, and so they started to question Yajnavalkya, who professed himself to be the wisest among them. "Everything here is pervaded by death," says Yajnavalkya. "By what means does the sacrifice free himself from the reach of death?" Yajnavalkya said, "By the Hotter chief priest, by fire, by speech. This is freedom, complete freedom." Fire is action, and speech, of course, is speech, but also action. It's I think these things are metaphorical to describe those three passages to spiritual enlightenment, as we discussed before, which were the let's just go up here. My laptop is sticking, I apologize for that. The sravana, the hearing, the logical reflection, and contemplative meditation. So these are metaphors for that. By knowledge of the identity of the sacrifice, the fire and the ritual speech, one gets beyond death. So this is the passage, the fire being the actions part of things, the power behind that spiritual embarking on that spiritual practice, and the power behind it. And speech being inner speech, external speech, expression of what is taught through those three passages. Yanavalkya, since everything here is pervaded by day and night, by what means does the sacrifice free himself from the reach of day and night? And Yanavalkya says, by the Advarya priest, which is the priest of the ritual, the assistant who assists the priest in the ritual. By the eye, by the sun, this is the Advarya, this is the freedom. So he's talking about metaphorical passage, those three passages, and also ritual sacrifice and the practice of sacrifice. All of these seem to be identified as means of or aspects of this spiritual journey. Now, this uses so much metaphor. It borders on actually a little bit insane. It's excessive amounts of it, and you're going to see this over and over again. I've got an intuitive feeling about this, because from what I've read so far, it's pretty pervasive in this text. So be aware about all this sun, the eye, the fire, the speech, the moon, the tongue, the limbs, the arm, the horse sacrifice, the animal. It's over and over repeated again and again. And you've got to look at the hidden meaning in them if possible, if we can derive it as such. Yanavalkya said, since everything here is overtaken, bright and dark fortnights, whence everything is overcome. By what means does the sacrifice free himself from the reach of the bright and the dark fortnights? So bright and dark is the light and the dark. The bright being the spiritual passage, and the dark being the more non-spiritual passage, the opposite of light and love. By the Udka priest, the one of the four principal priests sacrifice. So there's many different types of priests. So there's the Udka priest, which is the principal, one of the four priests that performs sacrifice. There is the Udata. Okay, this is not working again. I apologize again for this. I'm trying to go back and it's not working. Okay, I'm not going to be able to go back here. It's not responding. My laptop's having a lot of problems at the moment. It's very, very slow, so I apologize. Let me go back to where we were. Okay, Yanavalkya said, so this is by the Udaka priest, one of the four principles, by the air, the breath, and this freedom. And so it repeats over and again. This passage repeats over and over again. The end of this passage repeats over and over and over again. So I've taken the main content of it for you. Yanavalkya said, how many kinds of rig verses will the Hotta priest use today in this sacrifice? What does one win by these? Whatever that is here that has breath. So it's basically talking about the sacrifice has meaning if it's containing spiritual content, which is what the breath signifies. Yanavalkya said, how many kinds of oblations, which are offerings, will the Advarya priest offer today? When offered, blaze upward, make a great noise. What does one win by these? One wins the world of the gods, wins the world of the fathers, and the worlds of men. Again, expanding on what they believe to be sacrifices or offerings to the heavens, to the gods, the cosmic deities, avatars that they've created, and you can achieve these apart of a larger practice. You achieve these elevations. Yanavalkya said, how many divinities does the Brahma priest on the right protect the sacrifice today? The mind alone. Mind is infinite. An infinite world he wins thereby. So he's talking about the Brahmana elevates his offering, his divinity through the expansion of his mind. Yanavalkya said, how many hymns of praise will the Udgotari priest chant today? So there's many different priests, as you can see. The introductory hymn is the in-breath. Hymn accompanying the sacrifice is the out-breath. Benedictory hymn is the diffused breath. Wins the world of the earth, the atmosphere, and the world of the heavens. So the internal breath to then recite the hymn, which is the external breath of emitting the hymn through a resonance from within. And the benedictory being the diffuse is that it goes out into the universe, and therefore we are integrating with all that is the universe, as it were, the cosmos, and then winning what is called absorbing, integrating into the world, the earth, atmosphere, and the heavens above. This is very metaphorical, so you could, if these interpretations don't resonate, then please do pick up the book and see what they mean for yourself. And the second Brahmana, the man in bondage and his future at death. Okay, Jarat Karva questioned him, how many perceivers are there? 8 perceivers? 8 over-perceivers? The Gurhas are the organs of perception, graspers or apprehenders, and the Atigrahas are the objects of perception. So they're basically talking about what organs perceive and what are the objects that we perceive here. They told them 8 perceivers, 8 over-perceivers. Again, it's excessive narrative here and descriptive form. So they talk about speech is the organ of perception, so this is one of the 8, and is also an over-perceiver, as is also an object. The tongue is by taste, is an over-perceiver. The eye, seized by forms, is an over-perceiver. The eye, one sees, through that we see forms. The ear, seized by sound, is an over-perceiver, and it hears sound. The mind is seized by desire, one desires through the mind. The hands are seized by action and perform action. The skin, one feels touch. These are the 8 organs of perception and over-perceivers. What does it mean by over-perceivers? Well, for me, it means the perception is, yes, we are interacting with the material world through all of these. You know, we interact through speech, we interact through the tongue, we interact through the eye, we interact through the ear, we interact through the mind, we interact through the hands, we interact through the skin. And so these are organs of perception, how we receive and how we receive things in the material, which then form our perceptions. And over-perceivers can also be those that you could look at in 2 ways, can help us see beyond, being over-perceive, to perceive beyond a standard perception, or it can be over-perceive into the matter and attach us to matter, which is where the light and the dark would come from. So it could be interpreted both ways, whichever way you wish to read this. Everything is the food of death, as everything is born and is imperiled by and is subject to death. Death being the detachment from spirit itself, and entering in the matter realm. So everything is food. So everything that's perceived, everything that is received from these eight perceivers is a food. And you can either be subject to, everything can be born, and we can also be subject to death. So this is, I think, where the over-perceiving aspects come in. Yanavalkya said, when such a person, a liberated sage, dies, do the vital breaths move up from him or do they not? So this is talking about when someone dies, the vital breath being the spirit itself, where does it go? They gathered together in him. He is inflated, thus the dead man body dies. Is inflated. I think that probably means the spirit was in him, or then the spirit leaves. But there's not much narrative around that. It's difficult to understand there's not a lot of explanation what some of this means. In fact, there isn't any. You've got to take it for yourself, apart from the translations. Yanavalkya said, a person dies, what is it that does not leave him? So this is talking about the spirit. The name is infinite, and the infinite are the Visvadevas, all the gods as a whole. Who knows wins an infinite world? What remains is the name, which is Nama. It does not perish at death. Buddhist doctrines state that the element which is reborn is Nam Rupa, which is Nama is the shape, name, nama, which is the does not perish, and the shape that does not perish. In other words, every shape perished. So this is effectively talking about these two. This is talking about the infinite does not leave him. Now it leaves the body because the body dies, but the vital breath remains. It enters into what is known as here as the it's the gods of the whole. So this is talking about the infinite spirit is a reflection or a fractal of the whole, of the all, and it's encompassing of all the demigods and avatars and archetypes that we've created. So it's all gods as one whole. And it means once one understands this, we can start winning the infinite world. In other words, we can start integrating ourselves into it, understanding that there is a spirit which does not leave, i.e. does not perish. And that's where the name Rupa comes in from a Buddhist doctrine. What becomes of this person? And it says, what comes of this person who then dies, and the infinite spirit then continues to exist. What becomes of this person? Well, karma produced rebirth. Karma remains to cause a new existence, which it does. It doesn't force the new existence. We manifest that ourselves, but it's driven to us by our karmic clothing, our tendencies, our akashic clothing, our covering in which we cover out, which we enclose ourselves in as we come into this realm and release ourselves in when we remove ourselves from the universe. But when we enter back in, we cover ourselves, enclose ourselves in our karmic clothing, or rather our akashic clothing, which is there, which is a cosmic record of our being in matter. Okay, third Brahmana, the result of the performance of the horse sacrifice. Again, this mentions the horse sacrifice again. Yanavalkya said, we are traveling around to the house of Pantakala. He had a daughter who was possessed by a Gandharva, which is a celestial being of sound and dance. We asked him, this is asking the Gandharva, which is in the daughter. We asked him, who are you? And he said, I am a Sundhavan. When we were asking him about the ends of the earth, so they started to ask this being questions. The questioner who obtained the knowledge of the limits of the earth from the Gandharva asks Yanavalkya about the descendants of Pariksit. The writer believes in the fact of possession. The Pantakala's daughter was possessed by the Gandharva, an aerial spirit, and so served as a medium. She was asked about the actual extent of the world. So what they did, they gathered around, they travelled, and they found this possessed daughter. And they decided to ask this being who possessed her information, knowledge about the extent of the world and the world beyond. Yadavaska said to the Gandharva, the Gandharva told you that they went there, those who perform horse sacrifice go, has some cosmic content. So this is talking about this passage didn't make any sense. It basically talked about this being says if you practice the horse sacrifice, you go into these heavens, and it started talking about the moon and the sun, and it went on and on and on, like with these just stating cosmic bodies. And so I didn't want to write all that out, so you guys can look at that as well. It didn't have a lot of meaning to me, so I didn't take the additional time to extend that any further. The fourth Brahmana, the theoretical unknowability of Brahman. Remember, Brahman is the supreme consciousness. Just so that we remind ourselves what that is. Usata Sakrayana asked him, Yanavalkya, explain to me the Brahman that is immediately present. Who is the self in all things? This is yourself that is within all things, he says. He who breathes in with your breathing, he who breathes out with your breathing, is the self of yours, which is in all things. He who breathes out with your breathing. So this passage alone should explain to you that it should be a great example of how the Upanishads are written. It's written in very extended narrative to explain the simple. And this is effectively saying that the Brahma is everything that is you. It's your breath, in breath, it's your out breath, it's your everything in between breath. It's your mind, it's your limbs, it's your tongue, it's your eye, it's your ear, it's your hands, it's your skin, it's the cosmos, it's land, it's every limb of every aspect of animal, it's every cosmic body in the heavenly realms. It's the Upanishads use very, very twisted, very, very complex narrative to describe something. It's extended narrative to describe something. Now, I understand why this is, because this comes from the age in which it was written. Now, I've read other books of this type, and I can rest assured that other spiritual seers that have written about the Vedas write in exactly the same way, and have done in the 19th century, when I've read some books written in the early 19th century. Now, they write in exactly the same way, very extended narrative to explain the very simple. Now, I get frustrated by this personally. Now, this in the Upanisads, not so much because it was written in those times, but those who continue to write this way. It's a false impression of intellectual discourse. Spirituality does not need to be complex or complicated. It is very simple, actually. The message in all of this can be compressed probably down to 10 pages, in actual fact. The very core message. If you stripped everything away, it could be. But it's 1,000 pages long. So it's just wanted to show you this example. Just remember, this is how it's written. So when you read these things, you have to be patient when you read them, because they do use extended narrative. Don't be fearful of the extended narrative, because it will come across like it's intellectual, but there's way too much mind overlay in its interpretation. But I understand why it's written this way, because of the time when it was produced. Okay, Osata said, "This has been explained by you. This is a cow, this is a horse. Explain to me, Brahman, that is immediately present. You cannot see," and Yalkavanya said, "You cannot see the seer of seeing. You cannot hear the hearer. You cannot think the thinker of the thinking. Here's yourself, which is in all things. Everything else is evil." So this is again explaining that your spiritual self is in all things, but you can't see it, you cannot hear it, you cannot think of it. It is just the self. Everything else that is not the self is evil. In other words, it is detached from the self. That is what this is saying. And this is true. You cannot see, hear, or think about it. You have to feel. The spirit, when it's unveiling itself, is felt. It's a felt energy, and it's not something that you'll be able to measure. That's why science and those of the logical mind dismiss its existence altogether. Okay, fifth Brahmana. The renunciation, the way to know Brahman. Kohola asked him, this is another of the Brahmanas from the first chapter, remember, they all gathered around asking him questions. Yanavalkya said, Is it that which transcends hunger and thirst, sorrow and delusion, old age and death, the Brahmanas, having known that self, having overcome the desire for sons, desire for wealth, desire for worlds, let a Brahman, after he has done with learning, desire to live as a child. And so let me just explain the first part of this. So they asked him a question about Brahman again, and Yalkavanya said it is basically the thing that transcends all aspects of material, physical expression or perception. This is hunger, thirst, sorrow, delusion, old age, death, desire, overcoming the desire for sons, i.e. procreation, a desire for wealth, desire for the ownership and governance and domination of worlds. And this is what they're saying. And then it goes on to this bit. Let a Brahman, after he has done with learning, desire to live as a child. I'll explain this bit soon in a moment. State of childhood, and with learning, he becomes silent mediator. He becomes a Brahmana, a knower of Brahman. The knowers embrace the life of a monk and wander as mendicants. Scriptures, which are sometimes merely the means of livelihood for those who have taken to that life. What does this mean? What this means is the life that has done with learning. This is intellectual learning. This is that passage when someone's a young student is a householder as described, and then the third passage is when one retreats and goes into what's known as the silent meditative spiritual journey. Well, learning is that previous part. Living as a child is the latter. And what does it mean living as a child? Now, it's described later in here, but the child has a very sincere naivety and is open to receive all things, all manner of knowledge with no prejudice, no judgment, no block, no barrier, no veil. This is what it's saying that one needs to become to truly understand the divine, and this is absolutely 100% true. One's ego must drop away in its entirety. Our intellectual, self-righteous, self-virtual ego's pedestal that we put ourselves must be rid of. This is what it is become of a child, to allow ourselves to understand that we know nothing, and to allow a true knowledge to enter ourselves. This is what it means by becoming as children, or live as a child, and to become in a state of childhood, i.e. a state of openness and simplicity, naivety to receive, because the ego selves and everything that's attached to that has dropped away from oneself, and you become this silent mediator. You start to understand knowledge and become a knower of the Brahmana or the Brahman, which is what this first passage is saying, and it goes on and expands onto this. Immediacy and the lack of reflection as in a child gives us the experience of the real. Absolutely. So he's talking about we need to open up as a child to get the real reflection of the real. Becoming as children involves the sacrifice of intellectual conceit. This is the ego intellectual mind, as I mentioned, the self-grandizing, virtue signaling, self-righteous self-being that we create around ourselves. We must be able to acquire naivete, what Lao Tzu called returning to the root, what St. Paul stated as thou art beside thyself, much learning doth make thee mad. Certain things are hidden from the learned and revealed to the babes. These are the babes of the child, or the ones that are receiving as in a childlike state. In this hour Jesus rejoiced and said, I thank thee, Heavenly Father, because thou hast hidden these things from the wise and prudent and revealed them unto the babes. These are those who have remove their ego selves and become open for the divine to enter themselves. Remember, the spirit can only come up if we give it space to reveal itself. If our space is just our ego, our conscious self, our eight perceivers senses, our ego selves, our self-intellectualized states, our worship of technology and sciences as being the only conduit to truth. The spirit has our self-righteous, self-virtuousness, our judgmental selves. It has no space to come up. There's no space for it. We have to make space for the spirit to rise, and this is what this is saying. The true knower of Brahman devotes himself exclusively to the contemplation of the self and shuns all other thought as distractions. This will kind of occur, to be honest. It happens. It's something that I've gone through various moments. But do balance this out. We are here to experience the world also, and our spiritual evolution must be grounded in this plane, because this plane is the one that strengthens it. Hiding ourselves away completely, you may achieve spiritual knowing, but it will be weaker than achieving the same moksha, or the release from rebirth, whilst immersed in the physical plane itself. A good balance is the recommendation. Okay, sixth Brahmana, Brahma and the world ground. Then Gargi Vakanavi, which is another of the Brahmanas in the group, asked Yanavalkya, said, see, since all this here is woven like warp and wool. Now this is complicated, but it was very long and very complicated, but I'll explain it when we get through. And warp and wool is what's regarded as countable and uncountable. So when you're knitting and sewing back in the day, the warp So if you had a tapestry and the threads were going vertically and horizontally, this is what warp and woof is. Sorry, warp and woof. Warp is the threads that run lengthwise, okay, and so they go that way and this way, and then the woof are the threads running clockwise, so they go that way. In other words, so it showed you a picture of it. So it's basically a tapestry of a knitted woven fabric, and it's talking about the fact that the threads are either lengthwise or they're going across at an angle, but they're all woven together. Since all here is woven just like those threads which are entangled in a weave, in water, on what prey is water woven, like warp and woof? And so on air, and so Yakovalka goes, on air, O Gragi, on what then is air woven, like warp and woof? So he goes on and asking these questions. On the whirls of the sky woven like warp and woof. So he's asking, how is the air woven? How are the whirls woven? How is the sky woven? On the worlds of the Gandharas, which are the spiritual beings, O Gagi, on what then pray are the worlds of sun woven? Worlds of the woven sun, worlds of the woven moon, worlds of the stars, worlds of the gods, worlds of Indra, which is weather and thunder, worlds of Prajapati, which is lord of creation, creatures, worlds of Brahma, woven like warp and woof. So he's asking, how is everything woven together, all these aspects of what we deem as the matter realm? Yanavalkis replies, Gagi, do not question too much, lest your head fall off. You're questioning too much about this. Gagi kept silent. So there wasn't a response to that. And it was just excessive, like I say, descriptive narrative that is not needed. I wouldn't have answered that either. The basis of this whole universe is said to be Brahma Loka. So effectively, this is a footnote. Brahma Loka is the supreme. Remember the lokas, which are dimensions? The Brahma Loka was the supreme upper loka of light, and it's depicted as a S with an apostrophe, which is regarded as supreme, and argues that the nature of the deity is to be gathered from scriptures and not inferred by logic. So not inferred by logic means mind, rational mind. It's to scriptures to teach, but the practice again is always your own. Okay, seventh Brahmana, air, the principle of the world, the inner controller. Okay, Aruni asked him, Yanavalkha asked him another question, and Yanavalkha said, we lived in a house, and it goes on again with this possessed daughter, and this is a wife this time. We lived in the house of Pantakala. He had a wife who was possessed by a Gandharva. We asked him, who are you? He said, I am Gobanda, which is a different one. He said to Pantakala, those who studied the scriptures on the sacrifices, do you know, O Kapya, that thread by which this world, the other world, and all beings are held together? I do not know it. He who knows that thread, O Kapya, and that inner controller knows Brahman, knows the worlds, the gods, the Vedas, knows beings, the self, knows everything. So he's asking, and this being saying that I do not know it, but he who knows everything. So in other words, it's the self. In other words, again, it's the internal spirit that weaves everything together, because the eternal spirit is a fractal and an image of the great all. And again, world spirit S, which binds together all beings from the highest to the lowest, the supreme S, which is the supreme absolute. Okay, and by air, I, Guantama, as by a thread this world, the other worlds and all beings are held together. Person who dies that his limbs have been loosened. Yanavalkha said, he who dwells in the earth yet is within the earth. Earth does not know whose body the earth is, who controls the earth from within. He is yourself, the inner controller, the immortal. So when it talks about a person who dies, limbs have been loosened, so it's basically the bondage of the body. We remove ourselves from the bondage of the body. In other words, the limbs are loosened, so we are freed. But those who are bonded to the earth, and the earth is their body, does not know, but it's the infinite self, which is he is yourself, the inner controller. The inner controller is our infinite spirit. The true controller is our infinite spirit, but of course, the ego cells of ours will have the external consciousness, the mind being overpowering controller, if we allow it. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not, said St. John. So this is again referring to the divine all, our Father, our source, our grace, and the infinite spirit, which is an image of it within us. Okay, he who dwells in water, yet is within the water, controls the water from within. He is yourself, the inner controller, the immortal. He who dwells in the fire controls the fire from within. He who dwells in the sky controls the sky from within. He who dwells in the air controls the air from within. He who dwells in the heavens controls the heavens from within. He who dwells in the sun controls the sun from within. He who dwells in the quarters, which are space, controls the quarters from within, the space in within. He who dwells in ether, who controls the ether from within. He who dwells in darkness controls the darkness from within. He who dwells in light, who controls the light from within. He who dwells in all beings, who controls all being from within. He who dwells of speech, which is one of the organs, controls speech from within. He who dwells in the eye controls the eye from within. He who dwells in the ear controls the ear from within. He who dwells in mind controls the mind from within. He who dwells in skin controls the skin from within. He who dwells in understanding controls the understanding from within. He who dwells in the semen is the other than the semen whom the semen does not know, controls the semen from within. So this is talking about the spirit, not the physical semen. He is never seen but is the seer. So this is saying that all of these things is never seen but is the seer. He is never heard but is the hearer. He is never thought but is the thinker. He is yourself, the inner controller, the immortal. Everything else is evil. So you can see, again, it's a huge paragraph, this, and I've compressed it into this single slide, and it was huge. A couple of pages, actually. It just says that the internal self is our controller. It can never be heard, never be seen, never be thought of. It has to be felt, and it controls all of these things. It's the infinite. The infinite is the everything and the all, and that's what it is. This entire slide is saying. Okay, 8 Brahmana, the unqualified Brahman. Okay, the knowers of Brahman call the imperishable. It is neither gross nor fine, neither short nor long, neither glowing red like fire, nor adhesive like water. It is neither shadow nor darkness nor space. It's neither without taste, without smell, without eyes. It eats nothing and no one eats it. This passage brings that the imperishable is neither a substance nor a possessor of attributes. Talking about the spirit again as being formless divine self. The command of that imperishable, which is the divine spirit, the imperishable is the divine Brahmic consciousness, the divine spirit. The command of that imperishable, sun and moon stand in their respective positions by the divine intention or cosmic law. And remember, the universe is mathematically precise. The quantum universe is mathematically precise, but works on divine law. It's conscious of itself. It's mathematically precise because it's perfectly balanced by the divine grace, by the fact that everything is perfect. Everything is mathematically perfect, but love, it has its own consciousness, driven by the creative forces of creation, preservation, and destruction of the universe, the karmic passages of law, and the intention and the drive of energy into matter through thought and intention. These are all combined universal or divine forces that create all things. And it says here, heaven and earth stand in their respective positions. Moments, hours, days and nights, half moons, months, months, seasons, years stand in their respective positions. Some rivers flow to the east from the white snowy mountains, others to the west. Men praise those who give to the gods, are desirous of the sacrifice, and the fathers are desirous. So they're saying this is paganistic, if you like, sacrifice to gain something for themselves, desires that they wish to fulfill. Whosoever Ogagi in this world, without knowing this imperishable form, sacrifices, worships, performs austerities for 1,000 years, his work will have an end. So this is talking about doing sacrifice for desire-driven purpose, which is exactly what most sacrifice these days probably in, and that's just as opinion statement, not fact. Definitely within the darker practices that exist, sacrifice is done for desire-driven aims. They're saying that they if there has no infiniteness or the divine love, the grace of love in there, it has an end through death, physical death. Knowing this imperishable departs from this world is pitiable. Imperishable departs from this world is a Brahma, a knower of Brahma. So this is talking about that which knows departs from this world, and I believe this is talking about moksha. Ultimately departs from this world because it's Brahman. We've achieved the state of release from rebirth, which is also in the Gnostic text is called autogenes. It's the same thing. Therefore, the unconditioned self, being beyond speech and mind, undifferentiated and one, is defined as not this when it has the limiting adjuncts of body and the organs, the products of ignorance, desire and work. It is called the individual ego. So it's saying the unconditioned self, the differentiated self, is not the differentiated, undifferentiated piece of us, which is our ego, physical matter, mind selves, which is collectively called the individual ego. When the self has the limiting adjunct of external knowledge and power, it is called the inner controller. So this is saying when the inner self is allowed to rise and the knowledge is then derived, it starts to become the power and the controller, and the ego and the individual ego does not. In the controller, the Supreme Lord, the self is everywhere assuming different forms. For the S, supreme, absolute, the differences are all traceable to limiting adjuncts and to nothing else. Limiting adjuncts are the physical things that we associate ourselves with. Okay, i.e. limiting, binding. The ninth Brahmana, many gods and the Brahman. The Vidagya asked him, another of the Brahmanas who in the group, asked him, how many gods are there, Yajnavalkya? Yajnavalkya replied, in accordance with the following Nivid, which is the invocation of the gods. As many as are mentioned in the Nivid of the hymn of praise, namely 303 and 3003. But how many gods are there, Yajnavalkya? And Yajnavalkya states, 33, yes, he said. 6, yes, he said. But how many gods are there? 3, yes. 2, yes. 1, yes. Yajnavalkya said, but they are but the manifestations of them. So effectively, he was playing with numbers here. And he was talking about 3003, 303, 333, which is also a divine trinity number. And then he goes down to 3, to 6, to 2, to 1. And one is basically saying that it doesn't matter how many gods they are. All of these are archetypes and metaphors we've created because they all manifest into the one, the all single divine Godhead, which is ultimately all we need to understand. We don't need to go through any deities, archetypes or metaphors or divinities or idols. We just need to bring ourselves to the divine one. Which are Vasas, manifestations of them, which are the Vasas. The Vasas is the combination of earth, fire, earth, sky, sun, heaven, moon, stars, are the Vasas, for in them all this is placed. The Vasas transform themselves into bodies and organs of all beings, which serve as a support for their work and its fruition, as also into their dwelling places. Which are the Rudras? The Rudras are the 10 breaths in a person, with the mind as the 11th. When they depart from this mortal body, they make us weep. They make relatives weep. So because they make us weep, therefore they are called Rudras. So basically, he's effectively saying what they're talking about here is the Vasas are the fire, earth, sky, sun, heaven, moon, stars, and so forth, and they are the ones that serve the fruition of the body, I suppose, in this dwelling place. And the Rudras are those 10 breaths, which are those organs, I suppose, the aspects of perception. And when they all leave, the mortal body dies and they make relatives weep. The 10 breaths are the 10 sensory and motor organs, in other words. Okay, which are the Adityas? And the Adityas are the 12 months of the year. They move carrying along all this, which is Indra, which is Prajapati. Indra is the thunder, Prajapati is the sacrifice, or the lord of creatures, in other words. What it's saying, 12 months of the year, they move along carrying all of this. Time. It's actually talking about time. It's talking about weather patterns, and it's talking about sacrifice of lord of creatures. But it's actually talking about time. It moves along all of this. What does it mean? It moves along the manifestation of the all. All of this is basically the all, the manifestation of all that exists. Okay, 8 different persons and their corresponding divinities. Okay, I've gone 48 minutes. I'll try to get this done in an hour, see if this works. 46. He who knows that person whose abode is the earth, whose world is the fire, this very person who is in the body is he. Tell me, Sakalya, who is this God, the immortal one, he said he. So he's asking again. He's asking another person now. Sakalya is another one of the, I guess, a seer. And the response was, he who knows the person whose abode is desire, whose world is the heart, whose light is the mind, who is the ultimate support of every soul. Tell me, Sakalya, who is his God? Women, said he who knows that person whose abode is forms, whose world is the eye, whose light is the mind. This very person who is the sun is he. Tell me, Sakalya, who is his God? So I think Yakovalkya is speaking to somebody else here. It was called Sakalya, and asking all these questions. Truth is he who knows that person whose abode is space, whose world is the ear. This very person who is in hearing and who is in the echo is he. Tell me, Sakalya, who is his God? The quarters of space, said he who knows that person whose abode is darkness, whose world is the heart. This very person who is made of shadow is he. Tell me, Sakalya, who is his God? Death, said he. So this passage, if I had to interpret this passage, is basically asking those who are attached to mind, those attached to desire, those who are attached to I suppose the mind, who is attached to the sun, who is attached to the ear, who is attached to the spaces of the world, who attaches to darkness, and so on and so forth. Their God is death. In other words, detachment from spirit. That is the God that they chose by their movement inward into the matter, inward into materialism, which is effectively what Luciferianism and Satanism is. We can not discuss whether these are actually forms that are now manifest. Luciferianism is basically when you think of self only, your service of only self, is sacrifice, and do art thou shalt wilt. In other words, which is a satanic saying, I'll just say, which says, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter, for there is nothing else. You can do whatever you wish here. It's free will. This is what Luciferianism is. It's the worship of the self over all else. And then Satanism is the drop. From that, you principally move further and further into what's known, into the matter, the material realm, which is called death here. This is Satanism. This Satanism and Luciferianism are one of the same thing. It moves us away from understanding our unity as one in the divine Godhead of love and grace and truth and light. Light is information and knowledge. Us to moving into Luciferian satanic practice, which is a darker, this is the 180 degree opposite of that, which is moving into pure self, do art thou shalt wilt, aspects of action, words, thoughts and intentions, driving more attachment into the material and matter realm, war, governance, sex, desire, paedophilia, name it, all these horrific things that go on, subjugation, ownership, governance, ownership of the world, domination, name it. All of these things, sorry, I don't know what's happening there. I'll just put that back on. All of these things that we regard as opposite of light, this is what we regard as death. Okay, he who knows that person whose abode is water, this very person who is in water is he. Tell me, Sakla, who is his god? Varuna is the sky realm, is the cosmic, is the god of the sky, the cosmic laws, and moral law. Said he who knows that person whose abode is semen, whose world is the heart, whose light is the mind, this very person who is made of a sun is he. Tell me, Sakla, who is his god? Prajapati is his lord of creatures. A similar thing, I think, to what they've just discussed. Okay, 5 directions in space, their deities and supports. This was longer than this, and I didn't take much out of this, so there's not much in this slide, unfortunately. So if you do read the book, you may find more usefulness from this couple of pages. Yanavalkya said to Sakalya, "What is the Brahma you know, that you have talked down the Brahmanas, i.e. knowledge, Brahmanic knowledge? I know the quarters with their deities, the space and their deities. Whatever forms we meditate upon, we become identified with them." This is a good statement. Whatever we perceive, that is where we are. Whatever stone across the river we decide to found ourselves on, that is what we are. Whatever we meditate on and pray on, whatever we focus on as being the divine, that is where we are. This is what this is talking about. You will identify with whatever it is. We identify with whatever it is that we focus on, we meditate on. If we meditate upon an idol, that is what we become. If we meditate upon desires, that's what we become. If we meditate upon Luciferian Satanism, that is what we become. If we meditate on archetypes, idols, demigods and so forth, that is where we are. We must meditate upon the divine, because then that is what we become. The semen is said to be an effect of the heart, for sex desires is a modification of the heart. The semen issues when the heart of the man is under the influence of sex desire. This is effectively talking about lust. Excessive lustful desire is instigated or rather triggered from mental thought. Of course, you think, start having desire-driven thought, which then triggers the physical process of lust and increasing semen production to testosterone and lust and desire, and that's what drives our physical action. You ghost, said Yajnavalkya, that you think that the heart would be elsewhere than in ourselves. For it were anywhere else in ourselves, the dogs might eat it. Of the hordes, of the bird, and the birds eat it to pieces or tear it to pieces. Sorry, I didn't write that properly. So I don't know what it means by ghosts, but it's talking here that the heart is in ourselves, the infinite spirit's in ourselves. For if it would be anywhere else, the body would be able to nullify it, and the birds would tear it to pieces. Another analogy. A ghost is that which disappears by day, which is the I guess it's most of the ghost which disappears by day you see at night. This particular sentence is hard to understand what it means by that ghost. Could be the spirit, could be the ego, could be the body self. Okay, the self. On what are you? You are your body. And yourself is the heart supported. On what are you, the body, and yourself, the heart supported? Yajnavalkya said, on the prana, which is the life breath, and in-breath, which is the breath of life. In other words, the prana is what you concentrate on meditative practice, which is the breathing. The breathing is also regarded as attached to the spirit. On what is prana supported, i.e. the breath? The apana, which is the out-breath. That is not this. It is incomprehensible, for it is not comprehended. It is indestructible, for it is never destroyed. It is unattached, for it does not attach itself. It is unfettered, it does not suffer. There are the 8 abodes, the 8 worlds, the 8 gods, the 8 persons. He who takes apart and puts together these persons and passes beyond them, the persons taught in the Upanisads, about whom I ask you. So this is talking about the breath is supported by the spirit, which is the breath which then diffuses outward into the universe. and it's not attached to anything in the matter realm, which is effectively what this is saying. And as we go past all of these attachments, distractions, and so forth that are listed, we go beyond them and we start to go into what Upanisads teach us in terms of knowledge. Okay, man compared to a tree. And this is the last part of this, I think. As a mighty tree, so indeed is a man. Okay, his hates are leaves, so I'm going to say his hair are leaves. His skin is the outer bark. The skin blood flows forth, and sap from the skin of the tree. His flesh is the inner bark. His nerves are tough like inner fibers. His bones are the wood. The tree is felled, springs and springs up from its root, and is in a newer form. The root does man spring forth when he is cut off by death. A tree springs also from a seed. When born, he is not again for what he should create him again. Brahma, who is his knowledge, bliss is the final goal of him who offers gifts, as well as of him who stands firm and knows Brahman. So in other words, it's talking about we are like a tree in terms of we are parts of our aspects of this tree, but when we are felled, in other words, when we drop into death, detachment from spirit, we can spring back up from a new seed. That can be the seed in this current life, but also when it says when he's born, not, and then again, that means reincarnated, we can have a new seed of spiritual journey and expansion. So I want to say thank you again for listening to me, and here's the book, and the second coming is you, of course, that we speak of many times, and become the practice, because it's important to do so if one is serious in this journey. And it's important that we all understand what we're doing within our personal passages and journey, because it's not an easy one. It's actually a simple. The understanding of it is simple, but the passage is not. It's quite difficult because it makes us confront ourselves to a degree which we're not used to. So I'll say thank you again for listening. I do appreciate you listening to these videos, and I do hope it helps. And please send me your comments to tell me that it's helping you, if it's useful for those who listen to these videos, because it helps me understand. It helps me a great deal when I find that these things are helping others, because it inspires me to continue. So I do appreciate your comments, and if you do send them to me, I want to say thank you again. So thanks again for everyone, and God bless you all until next time. Thank you.